who was added late to the process, but was a very engaged and energetic part of this report. The report is out after eight months or so after the commission was announced by the mayor and the county executive back in June. At the time, it was to be a wide-ranging examination of systems in this community and to really assess where there were disparities, racial disparities, inequities, where they existed, if they in fact were supported by law, practice, or policy, and what could be done to eliminate those disparities and inequities and to replace them with systems that really extended opportunities to people of color. Now, 6 months is not a long period of time. We never viewed this as an activity that could be contained within that period. We viewed it as a beginning. And right from the beginning, after the mayor and the county executive appointed 3 co-chairs, designated staff to work with us, and indicated that they wished that commission to be increased to add 21 representatives from the community. And even in that process, we recognized a tremendous amount of interest in this work. We had 10 times as many people who applied for membership on the commission than who could be appointed. We encouraged those people who were not appointed to be a part of the process. And through the working group structure, where the areas of interest were assigned to a group and community members volunteered, a significant number of the people who had wished to become commissioners did volunteer to be a part of that work. Beyond that, there were people who were resources, who were in the field. And so through three months or so of community engagement, which was obviously constrained by all of the restrictions that come through the coronavirus era, the inability to really meet with people face to face, the inability to convene large groups, we were very impressed by the kind of ingenuity that the groups used in order to really be able to reach out, get affirmation, get further insight into these problems, to listen to people, to get and to help that input help to inform the recommendations that ultimately came through the process. So all told, there were several hundred people who were really involved in the production of this report. There were virtual town hall meetings. There were surveys. There were direct invitations to people to come and speak to the working groups. And in one very creative effort of outreach, there was a bus tour when that group that was dealing with minority and women business enterprises. These are people who couldn't stop what they were doing to come to a meeting, who may not have had access to the technology to participate in a Zoom meeting. That minority and that MWBE work group went out, took a tour, told people we're coming to your business, and spoke to them directly about the various challenges they faced in pursuing their business enterprises. the lack of funding, the lack of access to the kind of capital that they needed, the inability to deal with the rigid requirements of certification that are imposed by governments just in order to bid on work. The things like this they learn firsthand. So all of this effort was then put into this report. And in the process, we found that certain problems, certain disparities popped up in more than one area. The one which came up almost across the board was that the systems were staffed by people who were, for lack of a better word, culturally insensitive. These were people who didn't quite understand the many challenges that their clientele was facing. This has been put under the rubric of something called cultural competency. And so it was just not the police department and just not the criminal justice system where people were felt to be lacking in cultural competency. All systems, the health systems, the mental health systems, the education system. And so this became a almost universal recommendation that cultural competency practices be introduced into all of these systems. Then we found some which were touched in 2 or 3 areas. One, a classic example of that was the civil service system. You can't become a police officer without going through the civil service process, which is quite elongated, quite extensive, takes many, many months to navigate that system. And by the time that you start out on the intake side, and by the time you get to the point where you could be ready to be appointed to a position, almost 2 years has elapsed. There was a strong feeling that that system could be compressed, but it would require a change in the state law in order to accommodate that. We found that the civil service system was an effective barrier to entry into one of the most viable, lucrative employment systems that still exist, public service. So we had said that this has become a way of blocking people, preventing people of color from readily entering the system. Those barriers had to be changed. And then the whole question of regulations. Why do you have certain regulations? Why do you say, for example, that people who are in the criminal justice system have to pay for services that they receive? And sometimes the inability to make those payments deny people those services. Sometimes they come with punitive measures attached. You don't pay them, they get added to your punishment. You can't get out of it because you can't pay it. They continue to accrue. So we found that there were many, many practices that people may not easily ascribe any racial motives to, but which were disproportionately impacting people of color, so that even though they might not have had the intent, they certainly had the effect of racial exclusion. These were baked into the system. People accepted these things as just some normal ways of doing business. So the result is that we have a report here divided into areas, and what we found is that we wanted to present these findings in several ways. And as I said in our press conference yesterday, and as we told the mayor and the county executive, that this is a report that almost has to be read backwards, because every recommendation that is stated in the recommendation sections comes from the working groups. In fact, we had something called a dissent. It's really, and I spoke to one of the two dissenters, they really did not dissent from the report because they were actively engaged. Damon Wilson, you may know, who is an associate minister over at Memorial AME Zion Church and works in the Spiritus Christi program. Damon Wilson was one of the dissenters, but Damon was the co-facilitator of the housing working group, which has produced some amazing findings. He didn't dissent from his work. Danielle Ponder, who, as you know, is an assistant public defender, a lawyer in the criminal defense area. Danielle co-chaired or co-facilitated the criminal justice area. They came up with some very interesting findings and recommendations. She didn't dissent from those because that was work that she engaged in. So but at the last minute, they said there was something that needed to be in this report, which wasn't in the report, and they felt that they needed to assert that. And that was the area of income equality, and the whole discussion around reparations. That did not come up through in the discussions. And we had a standing rule that if it wasn't a part of a working group's recommendation, it couldn't make the final cut. So they felt they needed to put this in a report. It is there. You'll find it on page 70, that statement, which is clearly articulated. And we recognize at the last minute after the report was printed that it's really not appropriate to call it a dissent. It is an addition. It is an additional area that needs to be examined. And we believe that in this phase going forward, there can be a very full-throated discussion about how do you bring more economic equality into the African-American community because of the long history of slavery, Jim Crow, and discrimination that African Americans uniquely have experienced in this country. So I think that this report will be recognized as a kind of a roadmap. We do not assert that every issue that can be identified is identified in this report. We'll make that clear right from the beginning. It is not an exhaustive study of all racial disparities in this community, but we think it is a good starting point. We think that given the time that we had and given the kind of research that was put into it, and you will find that, as I said earlier, when you read backwards, when you go to the section, which is section 3 of the report, beginning on about page 73, you will find these 9 working groups, and they're written in their own voice. So immediately somebody will say, well, they aren't all consistent. They don't all follow the same format. No, this is the way they chose to report them out, and we promised that we would not edit their work. We will print it as they submitted it. But from those 9 working groups came a series of priority areas. And when you get over into part 2, you will see that discussion of those priority areas. Now, we wanted to kind of put it into context. We said we can't have an extraordinarily long list. So we asked them, some groups identified as many as 13 issues, and Bruce can speak to this as one of the co-facilitators because his group was one of the most active in looking at a wide range of issues. So we asked them to go through a process of determining which are the most important, which are the ones that we want to focus on at this particular phase. Then they created something called a parking lot. You'll see that in almost every one of the reports, where the remaining issues are placed, not forgotten, not ignored, not scratched, but put it in as sort of a secondary status, still to be pursued. And it is quite possible that in this phase we want to move into now, what we call the implementation phase, some of those may be moved up. All right. And then, so you'll see those discussion of priorities. You can go back for the details because we didn't want to be redundant and repeat the same details. We refer you back to those working groups discussion where you can see all of the detail, you can see the rationale, you can see the discussion that went forth in some of them as to how they made their choices. And then there's what we call the cross-cutting themes area, because we found that some of these went across particular lines. They didn't just stay in one area. So we wanted to have that discussion. There's about 10 pages of that discussion, and then the recommendations, and then an implementation strategy. I want to just take a second on that, and then I will defer to Dr. Shafiq. The implementation is the place of action. And some of you, like me, have been on task forces and commissions. They spend a lot of time, they produce a lot of paper, they create a lot of words, and then they are soon forgotten. The people that commissioned the report may have lost interest in it, or it is quite conceivable that the person who commissioned it is not around when the report is done. I had this experience about 10 years ago working on governmental reform commissioned by Governor Spitzer, who was an extremely, I mean, he was well-versed in the area. He put together a commission to bring about the reform of local governments, but he was forced out of office before we could submit our final report. His successor, Governor Patterson, that was not one of his priorities. And so the report languished and it finally died. There are some excellent, excellent recommendations in that report, which never, ever was implemented because the person who commissioned the study wasn't around for its implementation. Now, part of that problem, what I learned from that experience is that we had made that report public, but we were being deferential. We gave the report to the governor with the expectation that the governor would release the report publicly. Governor Patterson refused to do that. He did not release it publicly. And because we did not assert that as our right from the beginning, we didn't think we had to, because we had a friend in court in Governor Spitzer. We never claimed that ground. Well, this time we claimed this ground. We said to both Lovely Warren and Adam Bello that when we give this report to you, we will also give it to the public. So on Tuesday, the full commission met with both of the principals. Each of the co-facilitators, each group gave a presentation. We'd already given the report to the mayor and the county executive a few days early, so they would have a chance to look at it, which apparently they did. We had that meeting with them on Tuesday evening. We had a press conference scheduled for Wednesday morning. There was a snafu. We had that press conference yesterday morning instead because somehow all of the media wasn't contacted as they should have been on Tuesday evening. When we found that out, we rescheduled. And when we had the press conference yesterday at 9 o'clock, the report was posted on our website at 9:01. So it is a public document. It is a public document, all right? And the kind of discussion we're having here today with you, we anticipate will be had with many other groups in the community. And we said to both of them, you have an obligation to create the mechanism to begin the implementation of these starting at about page 69 in the report. And we say to them that they should immediately identify those things in the report which can be taken up right away. Some of these things don't require any expenditure of money. They require directives. Then there are things that will take a little bit longer. They will involve other aspects of the community. There's a lot in this report that will require the participation of the private sector, the business community, the religious community, like we're talking to today, the educational community. There are a lot of other players, and the whole network of suburban governments and schools. The education report is very clear that we can't just continue to dump all the responsibility for educating African American children and Latina children in a school district which is short on resources, while these other districts sit out there flourishing in resources. So what is your role in ending this disparity? And the whole question of jobs, the whole question of capital infusion, that's controlled by the private sector. The whole question of mental health, believe it or not, most of the mental health services in this community are provided by not-for-profit organizations, not by government. The government puts up the money through the Office of Mental Health in the county, and they contract that out with a number of agencies that sit beyond the control. Well, it's your money. What kind of strings, what kind of conditions can we begin to attach to the use of this money? So there is this whole question of how we proceed to make these things come to fruition in reality. And that's got to be out in the open. And we say to the principals, they need to appoint an implementation body. There may be some people.
Not to Peter Peters.
I'm sorry. I thought I heard something. I'm going to wrap up in a second. There is this implementation body that will involve new people. There may be some carryover from the commission, but those of us who will not be on that, I mean, I make it very clear. I came out of retirement. I'm a private citizen. I have no legal responsibilities. I'm not elected to anything. I'm volunteering my time. I have other things that I want to accomplish in my life before I leave this earth. So I need to move back into that mode, but I will not take my eye off of this work. And I will not hesitate to pick up the phone and call the mayor and the county and say, what's going on? Why is there this lag? Why isn't things? So we're now insisting that there be reporting. There's an accountability mechanism every 3 months or every 6 months that there is a report to the community. We encourage that community members, whether they were engaged in the producing of this report or not, now be involved in implementing these recommendations. This is a major thing to go on. And finally, we're not the only one. There have been reports by UCLM, by Impact, by the Faith Community Roundtable and other groups who've come out primarily in the area of policing. There's a Police Accountability Board. The Attorney General issued a lengthy set of recommendations in the absence of grand jury action in the Prude matter. There's just a whole mass of other work. All of that needs to be factored in. Our MAPI work is continuing so that the RAISE report doesn't displace anybody, doesn't supersede any other group. It's just now a collaborative effort that has to go forth in changing the way we police in this community, changing the way mental health services are provided in this community, change the employment systems in this community to be more open. So I can't be, I can't say enough about what I can anticipate will follow in the aftermath of all of these reports. Reports are great, all right? This is a very handsome document, and for most people who don't like paper, as I say, you can access the whole report online. We didn't make a lot of these copies, but I'm sure they will. If somebody just wants, like me, because I can't read documents off of a screen, my vision just won't allow me to read documents off of a screen. So I need to have a document like this in front of me. So, but it is there, and it's, as I say, we shouldn't be quibbling over words, intent. We should say, here is an opportunity for action. This is a call to action, and everybody has a role to play in it. So let me stop and see if Dr. Shafiq wants to add any more to this, or Bruce Popper.
Thank you, Mayor Bill Johnson. It's really a great way, the way you presented the report. We really appreciate that. I think you cover most of the aspects of the report. And as you have said quite a few times to the mayor and the county executive, that the co-chairs are not going to go anywhere. They are there to see the implementation process. I think you made it clear also that the report has 3 aspects to be implemented. One is those areas which is within our own limits, meaning the city and the county. Those rules, regulation, those areas that they can do it within their powers. Then most of the things, if you look into the statutes, goes to the state power. And then, excuse me, then taking a delegation and continuously putting pressure on Albany, especially civil service, police issue related to police, related to criminal justice. That cannot be done easily by the local authorities, but we have to, and now we have a very good chance because we have some new members also in this Albany Senate and the House of Representatives in Albany. I think that's it. And overall, the Democrats have majority. If they are sincere to do the reforms, certainly that should happen. So there is quite a bit. I think the mayor said, if you really want to study it, go to the reports of the 9 reports, which gives you details. If you just look into the recommendation, that's not much. We picked up some from there, but real if you go to the reports, you will see the details. This commissioner, 21 commissioner, and Bruce was part of it. Thank you, Bruce, that you are here also. And there were almost 200 people working with these 21 commissioners. So it's a report of the community. Actually, you have seen reports in other cities and other states, which only concern, because the issue of police brutality is throughout the country. It's not only Rochester issue, it's throughout the country. Criminal justice is throughout the country. Mental health is issue of the, but there has been commission on mental health and police brutality in other cities also. This report is very different. And also in our city, also we had the police reports and the police commissions were there. But this report is diagnosing the whole disease, from where it is coming, how it should be treated. So this is a very comprehensive report that how we can take certain steps that we can elevate poverty, we can get better condition of living, we can have better housing, we can have jobs. At the same time, we can reform the police system, the criminal justice system, and things like that. So this is a report which is very comprehensive that you see it. The Mayor, Bill Johnson, has given you quite a bit of details. Before I request Bruce, I want to give you something else here. That if you look to this problem of racism, it has a 300 years of history. And how racism has been so grounded in our country that is hard. It will take a lot of efforts really to, I would say it would be very hard to eliminate racism, but at least to bring it under control. You know that there is a problem in our education system and others. Our education system is mostly around Western history. It does not recognize other continents of the world. It only goes from Aristotle, Plato, and then come to Columbus and the rest of the Western history. It does not say anything about the African American continent, Asia, Latino, other continents. It does not cover that there has been intellectuals and bringing them so that people, the students in America can learn about the contribution of the rest of the world. And they can see humanity is everywhere. It's not only Western humanity. That is leaking throughout the history, how now there are some efforts, and Nazareth College doing those efforts also, to change that, to bring diversity and inclusive education into the system. But even the city school do not teach African American history. So there are issues around that also that you can see in issues in education system, issues and training and other programs which will not, at least we can do some of the things which we can do immediately at this time that can happen. The other thing, just to add what Mayor Bill Johnson said, there is discontinuity, there is no interconnectedness between different departments, between different facilities which are offered in the Monroe County in the city of Rochester. That could be mental health, that could be healthcare, that, you can look into the social services and human services, how that interconnectedness can happen. So there is a very good suggestion which I want to bring you, that suggestion that how the, especially the three reports, if you look into that, mental health, healthcare, and there is another report, also a social services report, that you can see suggesting areas like community healthcare, community health center. That's very important. Community health center means not only to bring mental health, addiction services, healthcare together as one, but also to have local mentors, local skilled mentors who knows about their neighborhood. So in other words, the health center could be, the community health center could be everywhere. Now, I made a suggestion also here that now the Strong and RGH has opened urgent care everywhere. How the city and the county can negotiate to turn that into community health center, so we can have mentors there also, others. You know what will happen? Before anything happens, especially any emergency happens, the local skilled mentors will know and can, very easily find out where the problem is and in the stress area, and can refer it to a proper treatment, to a proper area where it should be handled. So meaning, there is a lot which is there, and I cannot go in detail on all of that, but there is very good. You know why we send our juveniles, our youth, our youngsters, teenagers into prison system? We are creating more criminals in this way. So meaning there is a lot how system could change, how reforms can happen. Now this is what Bill Johnson said. This is a community report. Together we can push for it. Like we do other things, we can put pressure on our county and our city, as well as on our, and Denise, you are great that you brought some of the new senators also in our last meeting, and as well as on Albany picking up in issues, how reforms can happen and things could change. So there is a lot that, if you look into the business area recommendation, that group recommendation, housing group recommendation, you see, the reforms has to happen in all sectors. If we don't do that, things will not change. So that's what Mayor Bill Johnson was going through the report. And I will close here because I love Bruce did a very good job on elderly care. And personally, senior care in the city is lacking. And those senior cares which are available are very expensive for poor people who can afford that. I remember at 3-4 cases which I dealt with that, people who had very lower income from their social security and nobody will take it. I think, and I'm personally thinking also what we should do and how we can, but this is an area that Bruce, he really dedicated his efforts as a commissioner in his group, how he did it. Bruce, you want to say something about it?
Sure. I was one of the co-chairs of the Human and Social Service Working Group, and we divided that into 4 pieces, all of which showed a not surprising pattern of racial inequity in child welfare, in the foster care system, in the use of sanctions. Why is Monroe County the highest percentage use of sanctions to deny people essential benefits on frivolous reasons? And you'll see some very specific process recommendations there. As Mayor Johnson said, cultural competence flowed through almost every working group, including social services and the many, many not-for-profits in the community whose boards and executive leadership do not reflect the people that they serve and the community. I was assisted, like many, by frontline workers, 5 in my case, all of whom knew more than I did about the subject of older adults. And you'll see, like other working groups, that our group put together some specific items that could be enacted, but also kept looping back to the underlying poison of structural racism, that the poverty among older adults of color is exploding in the city of Rochester at this point. And quite frankly, it is from a lifetime of lower earnings, of the interruption of possible employment through mass incarceration, a criminal justice issue, through underemployment, unemployment. All those things add up to a crisis in the elderly in this community, which is deserves our focus, another aspect of the structural racism. So you will find in the report specific things that government can enact. And you'll also find the recommendations that government and elected officials should lead in the private sector. I'm very pleased that our MAPI last month adopted the Fight for 15 as its #1 priority of 2021, because racially based poverty drives so much of the racial disparity in our community. And that will take a generation to fix, but it's time to do that. And as the commission work unfolded, I went back and looked at some history in my shelves here, and it was striking to me how in my lifetime, we're fighting the same battles over and over and over again and making little progress. But what was also striking is that there are these brief windows of opportunity. We talk about that in the union world, where we have a chance because the people, the workers, the population gets it and demands action. And I think we are in one of those brief windows of opportunity, and we need to jump through that. And we really need to drive the recommendations and the framing of this report. As Mayor Johnson and Dr. Safiq said, if we just let it sit on the shelf, this work will have not been worth it. But I think it gives us a blueprint, not a perfect one, but a blueprint to demand real change in our community, in our state, and in our nation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We have time for question and answers, and we ask you to limit your question to the panelists with to 1 minute. Now, if you go over 1 minute, you will be muted at 2 minutes. So try for 1. And religious leaders, would you please take the lead, because this is your caucus. It is your opportunity to find out ways in which your congregations will be calling to the accountability, as Bill Johnson said, in 3 months and in 6 months, there should be a series of letters to the mayor and the county executive as to how the particular recommendations you find when you read this report need to be addressed. So the floor is open. I will accept hands raised. Would you please hand raised? So those who are not visible, there is a bar along the bottom of your screen that will raise your hand digitally. So raise your hand so that I can call on those to ask questions.
I think Howard has raised his hand.
Okay, religious leaders, tell me, is there not a religious leader? Yeah, Lynette and Howard are the only 2 hands I see up. And since Lynette's a religious leader, we'll call on Lynette first.
Well, actually, I'm not a religious leader. I'm a lay person.
Represent a religious community, and you will report back to your pastor and leadership, right?
Absolutely, I will. So it's not really a question. I have a comment to make. And my comment is that this has been absolutely fantastic. This information, thank you, Mr. Johnson, for leading this and getting all this information. Now we have this information, but I really think that in order to get any changes to happen, we need to start with education. I cannot believe how much education in the last 6 months or so that I have begun to learn and to understand about this systemic racism and where it actually came from, like the streetlights. Like, you know, when the street lights are off, you got to be in the house. Black people had to be in the house, otherwise you go to jail. So there, you know, I just want to see the education. I want to see the education about when we're always blaming Black people for destroying the cities when things happen. But okay, 1 minute. I got 1 minute left. Okay, so you know, what happened when they burned down Tulsa? Is it Tulsa, Oklahoma? What happened when they burned down Florida? Where did that type of racism and that type of bad behavior, I want to call it, come from? So it's a learned behavior, and it's a behavior that, in my opinion, I feel as though people accept because it happened, right? So if we educate people of color, that this is what happened and this is why it happened, then we can begin to fix moving forward, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I'm out of time, Joanne.
Denise, I want to address this issue of education. What is our recommendation for that? So there is two suggestions for that, easily that could be implemented. One is those who are already in the working force, already there, they came out of the education system before, which was not teaching diversity and inclusivism as whole, racial justice, social justice was very, which was not there in the curriculum before. That is, for those people, we are recommending continuous annual, biannual training programs. And diversity and inclusion as a whole, which includes even LGBT, I mean, as a whole, not just part of it. A full training of them, continuous training that should happen. And that we hope that will bring positive changes. For those who are our youngsters, the next generation of America, we want overall changes in the curriculum from K to universities and colleges. All that could include that we are all human beings. That can include Africa, that can include Asia, that can include Latino work, that can include the West, both West and East in Europe. That can include all the continents, teaching to them that this is the whole world and we all together exist, and how to respect humanity. In other words, courses on diversity and inclusion, which we have included now. We are on the way to include more courses at college level, but it should start. If you remember, I started the Global Citizenship Conference for high school students. You know what the students wrote to me, especially those who came from the rural area? They said, we have never seen a dark color before. We have never seen a person of another faith before. We were never taught about this, that there are other humans. Thank you for organizing. Today I was sitting with African American. Today I was sitting with a Jewish student, a Muslim student, a Hindu or other. I learned a lot. I have those documents with me. That is just one day annual Global Citizenship Conference for high school. Think about how our next generation is growing, what we are giving to them. So this is my, in my life, what I have been through, what I am doing actually, what I'm contributing. I think these two processes will help us quite a bit to change the mindset. The mindset is 300 years old, but how we can change that mindset with steps that could be taken. I think that will help us in poverty elevation, other housing and other, which all comes from this racial discrimination, racial oppression. Others are not human beings. I'm sorry to be a little emotional on this issue, but this is what I feel.
Thank you so much, Muhammad, for your passion and for the work that you've done in this area and will continue to do and call all of us to engage in. Howard has the next hand up.
Yes. Wow. Just like the last person who commented, I'm not a religious leader, but I am a part of a religious community, a faith community. I'm a member of Abundant Life Faith Center, Pastor Reverend Dilbert, and I absolutely will report back to him. I'm also a supporter and an active participant in the Faith Community Alliance, which Minister Clifford Florence leads. He's sitting here with us now. So I didn't want people to think I'm disconnected from the religious community. But I have a couple quick comments and then a question. Um, I see in the chat importance of educating people, truth, and so forth, and that's what the last person said too. But even in this discussion, then it's important for us to be accurate, especially around history. I've heard a couple of times already that racism is 300 years old. That would take us back to about 1721 if we start from today. And the origins of this nation, most people use the date 1619 in terms of its development, even though it wasn't a formal nation that early. But actually, we could go back to the 1500s. So it's a lot older than that. So I'm saying that to say, even in the process of discussing this, accuracy, historical accuracy is important. Very, very important. Just that comment. Also, it's been said that this report belongs to the community. We must acknowledge, I think it's disingenuous if we don't. There are elements in this community, particularly those who are most directly and most profoundly impacted by racism, who haven't been involved in this process at all, don't even know it's happening. So I'm just saying we need to acknowledge that and figure out how to get them involved. That's always a critical missing element, always, in every one of these reports, always. My question is, the community is being urged to get involved in the implementation of the recommendations, even if we weren't involved in the developmental process. What if we have some fundamental disagreements about what we see recommended? Is there room? Is there space to raise those issues and to perhaps make adjustments? Because as I'm looking at the education section, I know I have some questions and some issues to raise. And so I'm wondering, is there room, right? Is there room to say, let's look at this again? And maybe it's not really the direction we need to move in, or maybe there's something missing and so forth. That's my question. Thank you.
So
You'll have it.
Let me try
Thank
to
you.
respond to that. Nothing is perfect, and I think that somebody once made the statement that we shouldn't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. We state quite clearly that we didn't deal with every issue. We couldn't deal with every issue. We stated quite clearly that everybody who wanted to be an official part couldn't be just because of the way it was structured. I didn't set those rules. But I follow those rules. But at no time after the commission was created was anyone precluded from working with it. And don't even now dwell on that. That's in the past. Going forward, there's no one who should be precluded. But I want to offer a cautionary point here about going back and trying to rewrite or amend or append or add to the report, because that can become an activity in and of itself. Why not take what is there? Because we need to create in this community a belief that we can finally get something done. We can be presented with a list of tasks. We can work through that task. And by creating this notion that we can work together, now we can move it to another level. I've always believed that there was more to this than what would come out of this process. There's more to restructuring the police than have come out of the reports that have already preceded this. But everybody is moving towards action. That's got to be the key here. We've got to create the notion and the will that we can get something done. So in the stipulation that this is not a perfect document, in the stipulation that there are things that could have been included, that I don't think there was anything that was deliberately excluded. But it was just a question of what do we take and how do we proceed from here? So I would strongly encourage everyone who feels very strongly about these issues to find how they can work within this context to create a record of action, because that's what's going to be important. 3 months from now, 6 months from now, when we hold our elected officials accountable for what happens here, they need to come back and say, here's what we did. There were 50 items on this list. We've already been able to implement X number of them, 5, 6, 8, 10, whatever the number is. And when they come back 3 months after that, they continue to add to the list. And oh, by the way, in the process of having this engagement with other people in the community, we found other areas that needed to be addressed. They have been added to the list. That is the way we make progress. And I'll stop there. That's the way we want to make progress. Just take what is in front of us and move towards implementing it, and then adding to that as need for that becomes apparent.
Thank you. We've got Reverend William Wilkerson and Reverend Clifford Florence. They are the next two questioners. And I want to affirm Lynette's eagerness to work on Education Task Force. And we reach out from Education Task Force for Rock Acts to welcome you strongly. I believe Reverend Clifford Florence was first.
Thank you. Thank you. I just want to ask Bill and the rest of the team there, from your conversation with the executive and the mayor, are we assuming that the power structures of the county and the city, particularly those that are white, that they're ready to come to the table to engage, the community and to face the very Black people that they're oppressing, to make sure that there are some guarantees, because it's a matter of trust that has constantly been broken in this county and this city specifically as it relates to the Black community, not precluding any other group that is being misrepresented. I just like to have a better understanding of your belief as a team. And I know some of the people who probably could be involved with this answer as well is not here, but I'm concerned that we're assuming that the oppressors of this county and city, and even at the state level, are we assuming that if they have been racist in their approach to addressing the oppressed, that they now have changed in some way, and now that they're ready to go to work and do the cleaning up of their sins that they continue to commit even while this report is being expressed? I just like to have a better understanding, especially for the white power brokers and even some of the cracker Black representatives, that we put Black people's face in front of these problems, but they take a Eurocentric approach when it comes to the solution. So if you could help me with that to assure us that the white community, and especially those power brokers, to your understanding, are ready to move with this process and not walk away from the table as they continue to do over the past 50 years.
If we agree that there has been broken trust, that people have acted in a way in the past that has undermined trust, we also need to allow for the opportunity to restore trust. And I believe that this process creates that opportunity.
It does.
It creates that opportunity. And if it doesn't, then we can have another discussion about what we do about it. But before we conclude that there is a predisposition to inaction, we need to allow action to occur. The mayor and the county executive have been put on notice. Let me tell you that there is a section in the opening where we indicated that there was a moment in September when this commission was ready to walk. After the news of Daniel Prude's death became public, 6 months after it happened,
Mhm.
and a month after the commission was formed, there was never any indication to the 3 co-chairs or to the 21 commissioners. We kept talking about George Floyd, and we had our own George Floyd situation,
Yeah.
which was well known in City Hall, but which was never shared. Those commissioners demanded that the mayor and the county executive appear before them. It was Labor Day morning, and many of them were prepared to offer their resignations because they said, how can we proceed if there is no trust? And we were assured they apologized, the mayor apologized, and she says, we need to have this work go forward. At that point in time, those commissioners accepted that assertion. And in no time since has there been any effort to interfere with our work, to suggest that what we should and should not have in this report. And now we produced it, and now we have presented it, and now we put it online and publicized it. And now what we said is, you can't waste a second in moving towards implementation.
Mhm.
You are under careful and close scrutiny. So, Reverend Florence, I want to allow them the opportunity to move in that direction.
Mhm.
Whatever trust they have lost, I want them to demonstrate why they can now earn our trust. And if they don't do it, then things will go haywire. But let's not automatically assume that they're not going to do what they've already not only committed to doing, but what they have already agreed needs to be done.
Bill, you
Um,
released the report on March 18th, and know that Religious Leaders Caucus here will be calling on the mayor and the county executive 3 months from now and 6 months from now. And we will do a lot of work with you in the interim. In the meantime, we have one more question, and that's from Reverend William Wilkerson.
So I want to offer a response to the report rather than raise a question. I believe that this report represents, in my experience in Rochester, which is only about 15 years, but it represents a coming together that I have not seen in Rochester amongst people who want justice and want change. Most people try to grab the microphone and you got 10 microphones going. This report, if we don't think about perfection, can be a common ground for educating our communities and organizing them around their voting rights, their registration, and their knowledge of what the issues are, not just their own personal issues, but by learning how these all are connected. This can be a way of creating major political change, which is going to be required. The power concedes nothing without a struggle. And so unless we organize with a tool like this, we're not going to work it. But with a tool like this, we can educate our congregations and the communities around them that at least you must understand this. People from all of walks of life and faiths have done this work on our behalf in a relatively short time. And the second thing is that we really need to start getting ourselves together. We've got 1 million pastors roundtables and religious caucuses. We've got to have some ways of having concrete conversation and mutual support when a particular organization picks up one aspect of this report for responding. We've got to begin to know how to work in tandem. Argue behind closed doors, because most of our arguments are in front of the people who are opposing, and they just laugh at it. But if we argue behind closed doors and then move together in a more united way, this report will generate other reports and there'll be action coming.
Yeah, it is a call to action. And I invite Karen Costello, who's on the Education Task Force for ROCAX, to give a very brief statement about how you intend to move the Education Task Force.
Well, I'm on the Education Task Force, but we currently function on consensus. So I don't push it forward. The group makes a decision together. So clearly our first action will be going through the report and seeing those aspects of the recommendations in the education portion of the report and from that work group, and identify those areas that we can jump in and provide support.
Thank you. Larry Knox, about Poverty Jobs Housing Task Force.
Yeah, I mean, I've started reading through the report. These are all things that we've talked about and pushed and even gone further on. So I think I think our main priority is, kind of like what Howard and Mayor and others have kind of focused on, which I think is very important, is putting the powers in play. As I said at the beginning, that sense of urgency needs to be there. So I bring this back to the task force, and then us figure out, with everybody else and others that are pushing the work of the report to put pressure on decision makers, our new elected, the heads of the nonprofits, other decision makers that have, need to be part of the solution, not part of the problem, and making sure that we get recommendations, enacted and time frame set, and our task force being part of pushing that. But just really want to help increase the sense of urgency is what I'm going to bring back to our task force.
And I know that our justice system task force will be doing the same with a lot of energy. Barry Swan, I think, is one that asked how to find the document. And it is in your email that you found today's Zoom link in. You will, if you read down the content of that, there's the minutes of the last meeting, there's the agenda, but highlighted also is Racial and Structural Equity Commission. If you click that, you will get their webpage and you will find the report, and you can print it out or you can read it online. Now,
Hey, Dr. Denny, I do
Yeah.
want to volunteer. At our office, we have a really nice printer. I can't make 100 million. Oh, I just see Howard just put that in there as a question. But we can make, through $11.99, a few copies available. If you can get
Great.
it somewhere else, that would be great. But I'm willing, just talk to me or Bruce. Well, actually, I guess talk to me offline.
Okay.
Since I know Bruce, I'm not in the office as much. But if you really can't desperately get a copy at all, like we can run a copy for you. I don't know if there's an official way to get some, Mayor, that'd be great. But we have access where we can make some copies out of $11.99. I'll get them to members.
Yes, Larry, and I appreciate that offer. Call the mayor's office, call the county executive's office, and ask for a copy of the report.
Okay, we'll do that. Yeah,
And-
thank you very much, Larry, for offering, but let's call the mayor so that these calls will indicate the magnitude of the interest.
Yeah.
Yes, Reverend Florence.
Bill, is there opportunity, and certainly want to thank Rock Acts for this opportunity to be included. Is there an opportunity for the Faith Community Alliance to be able to meet with you and others in regards to the report? And could we share some dates that would work for you and others that we could have a chance to have a discussion with you as well?
Sounds good.
Yeah, we're setting up a process. You need to call again to the mayor's office or the county executive's office. People are asking for meetings. Now, I cannot go to every meeting. I remind you again, not only am I a volunteer, I'm a 78-year-old volunteer. So I'm not going to be able to go to every group, but we have 24 people who were involved in this process. Somebody will be able to come to your group. Every group will get someone to come and speak to them if they request it.
Thank you. And I believe Minister Florence was asking for religious leaders to be able to meet together to see how we
Sure.
can implement this report, various aspects of it.
Yeah.
And yes, we can. And Minister Florence, if you'll offer me a few dates, I'll see that they reach out to my mailing list, and you'll see, and we'll find something that at least some of us can attend.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you
again,
very much.
Um,
You have
the-
my email address. Thank
Denise,
you.
one more thing. This is Muhammad Shafiq again. The report is also going to be translated into Spanish language for our Latino brothers and sisters. So that process is going to happen also, of translation into Spanish.
Mhm. Is there a final announcement anybody needs to make to alert everybody to good news, to how to implement things like this? Good work being done? Yes, William. Reverend Wilkinson.
I encourage the people who are here today and others to let this be one of the spaces where they come
Yes.
on a regular basis. This is a major way for us to understand where each other are coming from and what's going on, and be on the same page, at least that way, and have that relationship. So that when each of our organizations calls for support, we know each other.
Mm-hmm.
Let this not just be a one-time thing. Please, I encourage you. We need all of you and your
Yes.
organizations to be connected. This is a major communication space, not necessarily making policies, but most of the time we're all in the dark.
Right.
In our meeting,
Our togetherness creates light.
we have
Awesome,
a
Dr. Wilkinson.
we have a regularly scheduled meeting at noon on the third Wednesday of the month, and we invite you all to that, to the purpose of reporting on how you're implementing these and deepening them, widening them, focusing them. This report needs legs, and anything that you did not see in it that you know is truth and of value, my God, implement it. And let's meet on the third Wednesday of April and the third Wednesday of May, and certainly by the third Wednesday of June, have a letter composed to the county executive, to your favorite legislators, to the mayor on ways we demand they're implementing this and more. It's our call to accountability, and we invest in it. And you're welcome to be part of Religious Leaders Caucus and various task forces to implement however you discern is best. It's been good to hear all of you. Very good. I'm so grateful to the commission for their work, and so grateful to each of you for your keen interest and your deep desire. And alert your congregational members to the work that's ahead and that it's a blessed work.
Can
And
I
we work shoulder to shoulder to invest in our community to dismantle structural racism. Somebody just offered to say
Yeah,
something.
that was me, Lynette.
Yes,
That was
Lynette.
me. Yeah, I'm not a pastor and nothing, begin to be like Clifford Florence or William Wilkinson, but and others. But I just want to say that as we begin to cross the River Jordan, we have to stand up and hold our own. We don't have to drown. It's time for us to cross it and to swim.
Yeah. Thank you all. We're late in closing, 9 minutes late, and I'm sorry about that, but I'm so glad for every word that's been shared today. And I mean every word. Thank you and God bless.
God
Thank
bless
you.